Yeah, for sure. Yeah, let me know if it needs to be turned up or not.
There is something I must return to Malenia. The will that was
Malenia.
once her own. The dignity. The sense of self. That allowed her to resist the call of the Scarlet Rot. The pride she abandoned. To meet Radahn's measure.
In my last video, I discussed Malenia's wings, what they're made of, and what they represent.
Huh.
In it, I used the quote from Millicent that you just heard, and I talked about the Battle of Aeonia, where Malenia unleashed the Scarlet Aeonia and gave in to the call of the Scarlet Rot. Through viewer comments, discussions with my community, as well as other creators, I have continued to chew on this quote and think about the context and motivation of Malenia's actions. I won't go into great detail on Malenia's history here, that's covered in my last video linked below, but Malenia is an incredibly driven character. She is described as having unparalleled strength, wings of determination, a spirit of resistance, and as relentless. She has fought since birth against her accursed rot, with the help of Miquella's unalloyed gold and her tutor's lessons about sealing away rot by embodying flowing water. This struggle has defined her life, and overcoming it made her into a warrior of undefeated prowess.
Yeah.
In this context, it is shocking that Malenia would use her rot to catastrophic effect against Radahn and blight the entire region of Aeonia,
Hell yeah.
effectively unsealing the rot her tutor had locked away deep under the lands between. And so it is easy and not entirely wrong to view Malenia with contempt for her actions. The most
I'm just gonna say, if you were wearing Malenia's clothes going up against Radahn, I bet he would be so miffed. Like, there are previous bosses in, I think, in other Souls games where if you, or even in this game, where if you wear a certain outfit that the boss, like, immediately goes into their stage 2 because they're outraged. Was that in Elden Ring, or was that in another Souls game? If so, I either fought the boss and didn't know, or maybe, I don't know. I just remember hearing that. But just imagine how fucking pissed off Radahn would be to see you running up in Malenia's clothes. You don't know, Sean? There's a boss in one of the Souls games, maybe Elden Ring, where if you go in wearing certain stuff, the boss just starts off in their second stage. I don't remember who, though. Dark Souls 1? Oh, okay, alright. I haven't played Dark Souls 1 yet. Ceaseless. Okay. Yeah.
common read I've seen of Malenia's actions here are that she was engaged in an honorable duel against Radahn, and when faced with defeat, resorted to playing her trump card because she was too proud to lose. Now, I don't think this is exactly wrong, but I don't think this tells the whole story either. There was an urge to view the conflict as good versus evil or honorable versus dishonorable, but I don't think it's so cut and dry. And so let's talk about the context, stakes, and fallout of the Battle of Aeonia and the Shattering War.
I love it. I love this music. Oh my god.
The rune of death was stolen, and the demigods began to fall, starting with Godwyn, the Golden. Queen Marika the Eternal was nowhere to be found, and the Elden Ring was broken. But by whom? And why? Marika's offspring, demigods all, claimed the shards of the Elden Ring. The mad taint of their newfound strength triggered the shattering.
That reminds me of Warcraft, when they opened up the gate to Outland. I don't know, something about this it just reminds me a lot of it. I like it. It's good stuff.
A war that wrought only darkness.
Oh. Okay, not to pause it too, but remember in Dark Souls 3? Just dying a few times to the spears. You know, it was Just a couple times. It's all good, right?
The Conqueror of the Stars, General Radahn, and the Blade of Mikola, Malenia the Severed. These two were the mightiest to remain, and locked horns in combat.
This summary of events, a combination of the story trailer and opening dialogue read by my friend Bob, sets the stage for the Battle of Aeonia. Demigods slaughtered, a missing monarch, the Elden Ring broken. With Marika absent, her kin inherited shards of the Elden Ring, but also an empty throne. We are told that the mad taint of their newfound strength from possessing the Great Runes, shards of the Elden Ring, triggered the succession war of the Shattering. In a pre-release interview, Miyazaki talks about receiving the Great Runes, stating that in inheriting the shards of the Elden Ring, they each inherited a different power or element, so to speak, and each was twisted and warped in its own way, and it brought a tainted strength to each of them. While I do think that the Great Runes added a measure of strength to them, they were already powerful demigods. What I think twisted them and tainted this strength was not that the shards were inherently a corrupting force, but that inheriting these runes stoked their ambition and drive to see their chosen lord upon the throne. And I also think it is easy to lose sight of the fact that this was an inheritance from Queen Marika herself. Melina shares some of Marika's words.
In Marika's own words, hear me, demigods. My children, beloved, make of thyselves that which ye desire. Be it a lord, be it a god, but should ye fail to become aught at all, ye will be forsaken, amounting only to sacrifices.
Wow, thanks for the inspiring speech, Ma. Marika as a mother could be a video all on its own, but suffice it to say that losing your God Queen mom and having those words echo in your head as you inherit a shard of her legacy stands a very good chance of painting your actions just a bit. But I don't even think that was all. The circumstances surrounding Godwin's death, Marika's disappearance, and the shattering of the Elden Ring were mysterious. It was unknown who was involved, why it happened, or how all of it was connected. Putting myself in their position, it would be natural to be suspicious and distrustful of your kin.
Yeah.
Especially when they are claiming that they should succeed Mom when clearly I should.
Ooh.
And so, this distrust combined with the newfound power stoked the demigod's flames of ambition, and the Shattering War commenced. Which brings us to the climax of the war, the Battle of Aeonia, where the two mightiest demigods, Malenia and Radahn, face off.
Hell yeah.
The stakes could not be higher in the Battle of Aeonia. With the benefit of hindsight, we know that the Battle of Aeonia determined the outcome of the Shattering, effectively bringing the war to a standstill that is only interrupted by our Tarnished much later. That being said, Malenia and Radahn faced each other knowing that this climactic battle would likely determine the fate of the war. They were the two mightiest warriors remaining. With one out of the picture, the other would be in the best position to see their ambitions realized. But what were Radahn and Malenia's ambitions, and how were they in conflict? I'm going to challenge the internet to do something that it is historically bad at, which is to hold two somewhat contentious ideas in your head at once. In this case, that
Fair.
Radahn is both a horse-loving heroic Chad and a stooge of the Golden Order propping up the status quo. I can hear you typing in the comments, but hear me out.
No, I think Radahn is awesome. Oh, thank you, Saris. Thank you for the sub. Hey, dude. I think Radahn is freaking great. When I learned about, like, why he learned gravity magic and whatnot, I was like, oh, that's fucking sweet. Well, I mean, obviously it's not the whole picture. Gravity magic is also insanely powerful. As a gravity mage, I'm well aware that it is very overpowered for, like, 90% of the game. But no, Radahn is a pretty badass character. I enjoy him quite a bit. He's cool, but I also love Malenia. I just don't know anywhere near, well, I don't really know much about either of them. Not enough to say that I like know their lore very well. But they're both very cool. I like them. I enjoy them as characters. Very good character design, and I think that they have interesting stories that I'd like to learn more about. So let's carry on before I ramble about stuff.
Radahn's legend starts in his youth. Radahn studied gravitational powers in Celia under the tutelage of an alabaster lord.
Yeah.
Also, he would never have to abandon his beloved but scrawny steed, according to the remembrance of the Star Scourge. Once his studies were complete, Radahn spoke to his teacher and said, "I thank you for your tutelage, for now I can challenge the stars."
Yeah.
And still in his youth, Radahn earned considerable renown as the Star Scourge by halting the movement of the stars. A war monument was erected in Celia that states, "Radahn alone holds Celia secure and stands tall to shatter the stars." Radahn goes on to found and lead the Redmane army as their general. His helm depicts a golden lion with flowing red hair, paying tribute to his heroes. The red hair is for his father, the champion and second Elden Lord Radahn, and the golden line is for Godfrey, the first Elden Lord and Lord of the battlefield, who captivated Radahn at an early age. Radahn's red mane helm description quotes him saying, "I was born a champion's cub. Now I am the Lord of Battlefield's lion."
Yeah.
Radahn is an impressive character, there is no doubt about that. From learning gravity magic to keep riding his horse, who we know is named Leonard, thanks to Zully the Witch digging into the game files, to halting the movement of the stars, Radahn's feats made him a real Chad. And yet, and you knew it was coming, we need to read between the lines and explore the implications and consequences of Radahn's actions in the larger context of the Shattering War and his presence in the lands between. Miyazaki's quote that I brought up earlier with regards to the design of the demigods continues, and it says, "They each felt a madness and felt a ruin in their own individual ways. While there are heroic and mythological elements to the demigods, they are also going to have this very mad taint and this deep-seated ruin to them."
Yeah.
The demigods were a group of heroes and mythological figures who, upon the disappearance of the God Queen, inherit a claim to the throne and a chance to push the lands between in the direction of their choosing, and it drives all of them to varying degrees of madness and tragedy.
I feel like that's a pretty common theme in a lot of in a lot of like graphic horror stuff, like even in stuff like the movie Mad God. It's kind of a trope that gets used quite a bit, but I really enjoy that kind of content. So it's like the one thing that I will cling on to till my bitter end. These like decaying, decrepit, rotten worlds where powerful beings fight with each other over the scraps of whatever's left. Yo. I thoroughly enjoy that kind of content. The really dark stuff. I don't know if you can tell. New Resident Evil trailer movie? Or movie trailer? No, I haven't. You mean New York? Yeah, New York. You know, I've never actually been to New York City. This whole not being American kind of, you know, does that.
Radahn is ultimately driven mad and eaten from the inside out by Scarlet Rot, but that's just the tragic conclusion. My perspective on Radahn's fall from grace came out of a discussion I had on my Discord server, and it's an idea that I've been teasing out ever since, which is Radahn fights against change, and it's his undoing. For starters, his horse Leonard. It's the classic love story of a large man and a small horse. He is so determined to keep Leonard as his steed that he studies gravity techniques in order to ride him. While this love is endearing on one hand, I don't know that it was the best for Leonard. Even in this shot before the advent of the Scarlet Rot and Caelid, Leonard is struggling. I think Radahn's design is not only meant to be evocative, but it is also representative of the ridiculous degrees he will go to avoid change. This is further supported by other details of his legend. The Star Scourge heirloom states the mightiest hero of the demigods confronted the falling stars alone, and thus did he crush them, his conquest sealing the very fate of the stars. Men will literally confront the stars and seal fate before seeing a therapist. As mentioned before,
True.
this act holds Celia secure, which I often see as proof of this as a heroic act. I won't argue that keeping a meteor or calamity from happening to Celia wasn't heroic, but we don't really know for certain what specifically this did for Celia. What we do know for certain is that his conquest sealed the fate of the stars. Celestial Dew tells us that once upon a time, the stars of the night sky guided fate. And even more specifically, we learn from Selen that
The stars alter the fate of the Karian royal family, and the fate of your mistress, Rani. But long ago, General Radahn challenged the swirling constellations, and in a crushing victory arrested their cycles.
I can't say for sure what fate awaited Celia, but Radahn, the demigod who defied nature to keep riding his horse, fettered the stars to avoid fate, and probably not just for Celia. Radahn is Carrion after all, and arresting the swirling constellations puts his fate in stasis. And not just his fate. We know for certain that halting the stars interfered with Rani's ambitions, and we can speculate with some confidence that the same could be true for his brother Rykard, who is also Carrion. The Shattering War was being fought to determine the fate of the lands between, and as someone who defies change, Radahn would be motivated to keep the stars still, not only to arrest his fate, but that of his siblings who he was in conflict with. Which brings us to Radahn's motivations and ambitions in the Shattering. As discussed, Radahn wants to keep the status quo. That means he supports keeping the Golden Order how it is and defying anyone who would try and shake things up or change things. He has already arrested the stars to avoid fate, but how else can he return things to the status quo? Radahn is a general who idolizes Radahn the Champion and Godfrey the Lord of the battlefield. Elden lords and conquerors who united the lands between for the Golden Order in the first place. I can imagine no other strategy and no greater ambition for Radahn than for him to follow in their footsteps and reunite the lands between through might. Malenia, Blade of Miquella, also knew this, and knew that in order for Miquella's order to come to fruition, she would need to defeat Star Scourge Radahn to overturn the status quo.
Makes sense.
I covered Malenia's history in detail previously, but the broad strokes are that her early years were spent overcoming the rot within by mastering the blade. This was a feat she may have never gotten the opportunity to take if it wasn't for Miquella's unalloyed gold. The incantation Radagon's Rings of Light tells us that the young Miquella abandoned Golden Order fundamentalism, for it could do nothing to treat Malenia's accursed rot.
Aww.
This was the...
I need to learn more about Malenia's past as well, to be totally honest. We should probably at some point watch lore videos for all the individual demigods so that I can get a little bit more of an in-depth understanding.
Beginning of unalloyed gold. Miquella started unalloyed gold as a means to treat Malenia's rot, something that the Golden Order could not do. And it's not just the Golden Order that Miquella abandoned. Unalloyed means that it is pure and not mixed with anything else. Miquella's needle explains that it is one of the unalloyed needles that Miquella crafted to ward away the meddling of outer gods. I believe that what makes unalloyed gold pure is that it is free from the influence of the outer gods. We see this in action in how it halts Malenia's scarlet rot, an affliction brought to the lands between by the essence of an outer god sealed away by her tutor. We also see this in how Miquella's needle can be used to subdue the inherited flame of frenzy, madness brought to the lands between by the Three Fingers, a messenger of an outer god. And I think this also means that the unalloyed gold is a ward against the meddling of the greater will. The Hallowed Tree Crest surcoat description says that, though watered with Miquella's own blood since it was a sapling, the Halig tree ultimately failed to grow into an Erd tree. I won't get into all the details surrounding unalloyed gold and the Halig tree. You can check out these recommended videos in the description below. But what's important here is that with unalloyed gold in the Halig tree, Miquella sought to form a new order separate from the Erd tree and the Outer Gods. And Malenia is in full support. Malenia's winged helm gives a quote from Malenia herself saying, "My brother will keep his promise. He possesses the wisdom, the allure of a god. He is the most fearsome Empyrean of all."
Oh.
Malenia wanted to see her brother become the god of his new order, with a new Erd tree separated from the influence of the Outer Gods. Malenia is living proof how detrimental their presence is, and Miquella's order is the only hope of curing herself and ridding the lands between of the progenitors of so much of its suffering.
It's so
So
sad.
she fights to see Miquella's vision realized, and there is no greater threat than the mightiest demigod and upholder of the current order, the
Radahn.
Star Scourge Radahn.
The consequences of your actions. Goodness, who would have thought that crazy violent actions would have consequences?
On a broad scale, the Battle of Aeonia is a struggle between revolution and reunification, and the victor is likely to determine the next age of the lands between. On a personal scale, Radahn is fighting against change and fate, following in the footsteps of his heroes Godfrey and Radahn as a conqueror and unifier. Malenia is fighting for Miquella and his order, and for a chance to see herself cured and rid of scarlet rot. And they both carry the weight of their god queen mother commanding them to make themselves lords or gods or die as sacrifices. All of this is riding on this battle between these two mightiest of the demigods. And so, as we know, they lock horns in combat. Malenia, blade arm broken, leaps on Radahn and impales him. They are at a standstill, and if I was a betting man, I'd have put my money on Radahn ultimately winning at this moment. He's wounded by her blade, but her prosthesis arm is broken, putting her at a heavy disadvantage. And I think Malenia saw this too. It's a subject of debate what Malenia is saying at this moment in the story trailer. Some think she is uttering something to create the Scarlet Bloom.
Yo. She's definitely saying some fucking sick shit there. I know if I was in that circumstance and I had dirt on the person I was fighting, I would say the worst thing possible. Like, I would break their fucking heart. Like, I would quite literally break their heart. I would do as much damage as possible. How did you know, Sean? Yo, when I tweeted that, so many people were like, "Are you wasted? Are you sick? Did you get hacked? AI generated post? What happened?" The uncultured masses. You're too big for that horse! Oh my god, and he looks so ill too. He looks so ill, poor little guy. Oh, Leonard. A lot of people were very confused, Bridget.
Boom. Other think she is saying something to Radahn. I think that she is talking to Miquella, as one might utter words to a loved one or a god before the end, and he was both to her. He was her hope for a cure to her affliction, and a world free of the meddling alien gods. But she would need to defeat Radahn to make that happen. In my last video, I questioned if Malenia knew that she would bloom. And that was because I could not square why Malenia would inflict scarlet rot on the world when she'd spent her whole life fighting against the rot with the help of Miquella and her mentor.
Well, there's the thing. If she can stop Radahn, then even if the scarlet rot does spread, it seems like it is relatively contained to Caelid. I mean, if he comes up with the cure for it, they can cure that land. So overall, this is like a long-term goal thing, right?
Why Malenia would unleash the Scarlet Bloom is at the heart of how you view her in this situation, and why, since my last video, I feel now that she absolutely knew that would happen.
There is something I must return to Malenia. The will that was once her own. The dignity. The sense of self that allowed her to resist the call of the Scarlet Rot, the pride she abandoned, to meet Radahn's measure.
This is the quote that I've been wrestling with, reconciling Malenia's actions against her motivations. In my previous video, I argued that this was a tragedy because the call of the Scarlet Rot took advantage of the situation and preyed on Malenia at her most dire moment. I still think that's true, that the Rot was constantly gnawing away at her and her will to resist, and that when she gave into the Rot, she knew she was giving up having a say over the collateral damage that would ensue. But what's changed for me now is that I see Malenia's action as a very intentional sacrifice. Interpretations that condemn her character as taking a cheap shot, and therefore abandoning her pride and dignity against the honorable Radahn, are missing what her pride and dignity were sacrificed to, and how much of a sacrifice this was for Malenia. We already talked at length in this video about the stakes of this battle and how imperative it was that Malenia not lose to Radahn. So when it came down to the moment where she would likely lose and Miquella's vision would go unrealized, she abandoned her pride, dignity, and her whole self to the Scarlet Rot to give Miquella's vision a fighting chance.
Yeah.
And yes, she 100% doomed Caelid as well. I believe that from the perspective of someone like Malenia, who believes so fervently in Miquella, that sacrificing herself and inflicting rot on the lands between to give Miquella a fighting chance was the only way forward. Miquella was the only one who showed any capacity to overcome the meddling of the outer gods, and if the only way to rid the lands between of their presence was to make a bit of a mess first, then in the long run it would be worth it.
Yeah, see, that's what I was thinking too. Worth it in the long run. Yeah, but see, here's the thing. Her own self-preservation is more important. She's a demigod. Everyone that's not a demigod is below her. They're not important. You know what I mean? She sacrificed that whole land for a chance for it all to be completely eradicated. Also, like, as an act against the outer gods, I mean, obviously, mortals are nothing compared to them, right? I have a very strong feeling that the long run was a lot more important than the little mortal lives around them, including the land, which could potentially be cured. That chance. You know, I mean, if she dies, then nothing really matters anyways. So having that small chance is better than her just dying completely. And that's probably what went through her head in that split second when her arm got chopped off. Well, her prosthetic arm, but you know what I mean.
Especially when the likely victor otherwise would be Radahn, and the reunification of the Golden Order, the very order that had already failed to prevent the incursion of Scarlet Rot, the Frenzied Flame, and the Formless Mother from gaining footholds into the lands between. I'm not condoning or agreeing with this course of action, but viewing her actions as being a poor sport or dishonorable doesn't adequately explain the severity of the situation Malenia was in. And not to cast
Look at poor Leonard.
But viewing her actions as being a poor sport or dishonorable doesn't adequately explain the severity of the situation Malenia was in. And
are we sure that this was all for the best? That poor guy. Oh my god.
Not to cast blame onto Radahn, but I do wonder if him holding one arm behind his back in the form of halting the stars did not aid the Battle of Aeonia concluding as it did. It is very impressive how powerful he is while also holding back the stars, and yet as discussed, was it not also him trying to control change from happening along too many vectors at once? He struggled against change so hard that he was holding back the fate of his sister Ranni undeniably, his own fate probably, and countless others possibly, all while he also waged war. That's a lot, even for the mightiest demigod, and his refusal to let go or embrace change in any way is his bane. The Battle of Aeonia is a tragedy. Malenia and Radahn were pushed to the brink by a mysterious conspiracy that ended with demigods slain and the Elden Ring shattered. Their overbearing God Queen Mother and her inheritance added fuel to the fires of ambition and distrust, stamping out any hope for reconciling their conflicting visions for the lands between. Miyazaki said that they each felt a madness and felt a ruin in their own individual ways. Malenia sacrificed herself to the rot to give Miquella a chance, waiting for her brother's return while the rot writhed uncontrolled within her. I want to say here that it's a matter of speculation if Malenia knew Miquella had been kidnapped by Mohg. I personally think that she was unaware that he was not still within the Haligtree during the Battle of Aeonia, but that either way her sacrifice was motivated by the desire to see his vision for the lands between fulfilled.
Yeah.
The Malenia we meet at the Haligtree is not the Malenia who fought in Aeonia. As Millicent stated, she lost everything about herself when she bloomed in Aeonia. She only returned home as a result of her knight Finley's heroic act of carrying her from Aeonia to the Haligtree and has slumbered ever since.
Damn.
She is a vessel for the now uncontrolled Scarlet Rot that within her seeks to turn her into a goddess of rot.
That's so sad.
Malenia is only stirred to action when we trespass upon the holy sanctum of her brother and God, pushing through the all-consuming rot to defend her brother and his vision. She is waiting on her God who will never come. Radahn was corrupted from the inside by Scarlet Rot and driven mad. His Great Rune states that it burns to resist the encroachment of the Scarlet Rot. As his final act, Radahn refuses change by continuing to halt the stars. Even as the Caelid wilds surrounding him act as a testament to the unavoidable progression of ages and orders, Radahn holds back change in the only remaining way he can. And with his feet rotted away, Leonard is now essential for Radahn to get around, a sad fate for a...
I didn't even notice that his feet were rotten away. I just thought that he was clipping into the map. Oh man. That's so sad.
a good but scrawny boy. We've spent this video talking about the political and ideological struggles that define the Battle of Aeonia, and I hope I've articulated adequately how this was not a cut and dry struggle between good and evil, moral or immoral, or even honorable and dishonorable. To conclude this video, I want to touch on something that became increasingly apparent as I researched the Battle of Aeonia and the Shattering War. At its core, the Shattering War is all about the dissolution of a family. One of the big themes of Elden Ring is passing the torch, whether it be the transition from one age to another or one generation to another. When you're gods and demigods, the dissolution of a family can bring about both. I've experienced how the death of a head of a family can expose the cracks in a family's dynamic, and how the complicated nature of losing someone like a parent, mixed with the dividing up of their estate, can bring things crashing down.
A little messy.
If you attack Muriel, you are a bastard. But also, he says this.
Are you quite finished? Take this opportunity to learn to master your emotions. Worry not, I take no offense. But others are not always so forgiving. Some take to anger, others sorrow. Bonds are fragile things, wont to break under strain. And once they're broken, everything is lost, with naught to gain.
Malenia and Radahn are part of a family whose bonds broke under strain. They took to anger and sorrow, and ultimately everything was lost and nothing was gained. And because it is a family of gods, it becomes a literal cosmic issue. It took me a while to sort through why the great runes, the shards of the Elden Ring, were such a catalyst for the Shattering War. But in the context of a family dividing up an estate, it makes sense. They're not cursed objects, they're powerful, but the demigods were already powerful. I think they're the equivalent of that valuable jewelry or collection of tools that are divided up by the children after their parents have passed. Their totemic value is that they embody the legacy of the parents and by their nature reflect the relationship that their children individually had with them and stir up what can be some very complicated feelings in history. This is that, but blown up to a scale where the parent is a god, the children and stepchildren demigods inheriting how reality works, and the ensuing family drama determining the future of the world. In the comments, leave me your best analogy for what the Battle of Aeonia is under this context in less elevated circumstances. Is the Battle of Aeonia like Aunt Malenia revealing a big family secret and giving Uncle Radahn a heart attack? Let me know. So there you have it, an accounting of the Battle of Aeonia and the many facets of the Shattering War that led to that pivotal moment in the history of the Lands Between. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, and if you want more Elden Ring lore content, subscribe to the channel, where I've got a hearty catalog of Elden Ring content with more to come. Thanks for watching.
Yeah, that does make you a little bit of a masochist, actually. It does. I don't particularly... It does look like the DLC is gonna bring us into the past. Both at the same time. just arrive on the battlefield while they're fighting. Yeah, I mean, to me, it personally looks like we're gonna see stuff from the past, but I'm also not 100% sure. I don't know everything about it. I don't know, man. I feel like it would be a little tough, but I think a lot of people like that. I thought that was good.